At the end of a well, it is important to perform quality control on your daily reporting data to ensure that there have been no errors during input. It is also good practice to perform some quality control at the end of each day during drilling. WellSeeker Pro has a number of tools that aid the user in the quality control process. This video will walk the user through the process, which is split into 7 steps. Just to be safe, it's a good idea to back up your database before you start the QA/QC process. You can do so by going to File and selecting Backup Database. Step 1 is to check your activities in the Daily Activity Editor. To open the Daily Activity Editor, right-click on your actual well in the database tree, select Reporting, and then select Daily Activity Editor. The Daily Activity Editor lets you view all of your activities from the daily reports in one continuous table and gives you a couple of extra tools for spotting errors. When you first open the editor, WellSeeker will scan for potential errors and display a message box if it detects any. In the start time and end time columns, cells will be highlighted in red if there is a time gap between the end of one activity and the start of the one below it. Resolve time gap errors by editing either the start time or the end time so that they match up with the activity above or below it respectively. So for example, I have a time error here where the end time for my surveying connection overlaps with the start time of my drilling, so I can resolve it just by editing the end time of my connection so that it matches up with the start time of my drilling, and now the error goes away. Likewise, in the start depth and end depth columns, cells will be highlighted if the start depth of an activity is different to the end depth of the activity before it. Resolve depth gap errors by editing either the start depth or the end depth so that they match up with the activity above or below it. So for example, I have a typo in my start depth for this activity so that it no longer matches up with the end depth of the activity before it, so I can fix that just by fixing my typo so that they both match. For each BHA that is used in the well, make sure that the BHA starts with a 6O activity, which represents picking up, and ends with a 6P activity, which represents lay down. There should only be one 6O and one 6P for each BHA run. The first time the BHA is selected in the BHA column should be on the row with the 6O pickup activity, and the last time should be on the row with the 6P laydown activity. In between those two activities, every row should have the BHA selected. If there's no BHA in the whole, the BHA column should be blank. If the program detects a selection in the BHA column that does not match the rows above or below it, it will be highlighted in red. So here we've accidentally selected the wrong BHA during the surface BHA, so I can fix that just by clicking the drop-down box and selecting the correct BHA, which will fix the error. Every single row should have a phase assigned to it in the phase column. If the program detects a phase that does not match the rows above or below it, it will be highlighted in red. So here I've accidentally entered in the surface phase in the middle of the intermediate phase, so I can fix that just by selecting intermediate from the drop-down box, which will fix the error. Note that non-productive time activities will also be highlighted in red. This is normal and there's no need to edit those. You can tell that they're non-productive time activities because the activity description itself will be highlighted in red. Once you've finished checking your activities, you can click on Apply, answer yes to this dialog box, and then click on Close to close the editor. The next step is to compare your daily report activities against the slide sheet. To do this, open the Daily Reports dialog. In Daily Reports, there's a menu called Data Validation that contains the tools we will use for the next 3 steps. Update activity descriptions from slidesheet, check activity against slidesheet, and get drilling parameters from slidesheet. For each of these functions, you have the option to use it for all reports in the well or just for the day that you're viewing. So if you're QCing your data at the end of the day, you can just use the single day option to save some computing time. For this example, I will click on Check Activity against Slidesheet All Reports. This function takes all of your drilling activities, which is any activity starting with 2, and will mostly be your 2K rotating and 2J sliding activities, and then compares the BHA, date, start time, end time, start depth and end depth against your slide sheets to see if the drilling activities match up. If there are any discrepancies, OilSeeker will generate a message box, and it will also generate a text file that gives the date, time, and a description of each error. You'll then need to navigate to that activity and resolve the issue. It will be up to your discretion whether it is the daily report that needs correcting or the slide sheet. So as an example, I've got one activity that doesn't match with my slide sheet. It's on the 8th of July 2019 and the activity is from 2:55 to 3:45. So I navigate to the 8th of July and then I find my activity, which is this one, where I'm drilling from 2:55 to 3:45, and then I need to check my slide sheet to see what it says there. So I can see in my slide sheet that my drilling activity that starts at 14,144 feet doesn't actually start until 3:05. So what I've done here is I've forgotten to add in a surveying connection activity in between these two. So I'm going to add in a new row for the surveying connection. To add a row into your daily activities, you just right click, select Insert Row. That will insert a row above the activity. And then I'm going to set up a surveying connection. And that surveying connection runs until 3:05. So that I've fixed the issue, I'll save and run my data validation again. And now we can see that the activity grid matches the slide sheet. If you ever need to delete a row, just select the whole row, and then right click and select delete. And you can add and remove rows in exactly the same way in the slide sheet. Now that you've confirmed that your daily activities and slide sheet line up, you need to check that there are no errors in the drilling parameters recorded in your slide sheet. This is important as the following 2 steps rely on this data being accurate in order to produce a good result. Minimize your daily reports window and open up your slide sheet. For each slide sheet in the well, check through your drilling parameters to make sure that there have been no typos or mistakes. A common mistake is that the drilling parameters get entered with the wrong units. For example, the torque units in this slide sheet have been entered in foot-pounds when the unit is kilofoot-pounds, so they should in fact look like this. If you're not sure what units you're supposed to be using, open the Tools menu in the main user interface and select Unit Sets. The units in this dialog are the units used in the slide sheet. Another common mistake is that slide activities are given an RPM value. This is meant to represent RPM at surface, so when sliding this should be 0. If I save and close my slide sheet, and go back to the Daily Reports dialog, there's an option in the Data Validation menu called 0 RPM for all slides on slide sheet. If I click on this, and then reopen my slide sheet, you'll see that all of my slide RPMs have been set to 0. This saves having to do it manually. Once you've checked through all of your slide sheets, save your changes and then return to the Daily Reports dialog. Once you've checked your activities against your slide sheet and you've fixed any issues, go back to the Data Validation menu and select Update Activity Descriptions from Slide Sheet All Reports. This will take the drilling parameters that you recorded in your slide sheets and use them to update the descriptions for your drilling and sliding activities in your daily report. So as an example, on this page, I've got a slide drilling activity and a rotary drilling activity that I haven't filled in the descriptions for. So if I go up to Data Validation and I select Update Activity Descriptions, it's now populated the description for those two activities using the parameters from the slide sheet. The last option is Get Drilling Parameters from Slide Sheet. If you use the singular version, this is the same as updating your drilling parameters table using the Get Params button. But if you use the All Reports version, this will update your drilling parameters for every report in the well all at once. So just as an example, I will remove my parameters and then run Get Drilling Parameters from Slide Sheet All Reports. And this has automatically filled in my drilling parameters for every single report in my daily reporting. Once you've finished QCing the daily report, you should make sure that all of your BHA performance reports are filled in. Open the DrillString editor by clicking on the icon in the toolbar in the Daily Reports interface. For each BHA in your well, open the performance report by clicking on the icon or selecting Edit Data in the Performance Report menu. In each performance report, click on the Get Data from DDR button in the toolbar. This will automatically update the drilling parameters in the performance report. Make sure that each performance report has a reason for pulling out of hole selected from the drop-down box. If the BHA had a failure, make sure that this has been recorded. If the failure was in the motor, RSS, or MWD, click on the appropriate box in the Performance Data section. This will activate the Failure Information section in the top right, where you can enter more details of the failure. If the failure was not in one of these components, you can activate the Failure Information section manually by clicking in the Failed box in the top right. Select the component that failed from the BHA component box or the MWD toolbox. If the failure required a trip, check the Trip for Failure box, and if any part of the BHA was lost in hole, check the Lost in Hole box. If you have it available, enter any additional information in the comments boxes. And then once you're finished, select Save, close your performance report, and do the same for the other performance reports for your well. That concludes the QA/QC process for the daily reporting. If you have TD'd the well, then you should go back to the daily reporting dialog and change the well status to something other than active. This will signal that drilling has finished to anybody monitoring the well remotely. If you are at the rig site, you can change the well to TD. If you have prepared or sent the end of well report, you can change the status to end of well report ready or end of well report sent. And if you are a coordinator and you have the authority to sign off on all the data, you can change the well to complete or verified.